It's been an active and busy offseason in Ottawa as the Senators added Linus Ullmark to their roster. Does that make them a playoff team? Ross Levitan of Locked On Sens joins us to talk about that and all things Senators next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show a very familiar face to Locked On NHL viewers and a familiar voice to Locked On NHL listeners, Ross Levitan of Locked On Senators and Sens Central. And Ross, it hasn't been dull this summer up in Ottawa.
No, and I'm glad we can finally shine the spotlight in Ottawa because back-to-back weeks on our Wednesday Eastern Conference show, Locked On NHL, where I do it with Mike DiStefano from Locked On Leafs, we had the announcement of Austin Matthews becoming captain. Then the following week, we had the Patrick Laine trade with Montreal. So it's been a lot of action recently in our neck of the woods, but Ottawa did a lot of their business right before the draft, acquiring Linus Ullmark and then making a few more additional moves right around the July 1st free agent frenzy. So it's been a lot quieter, just one prospect trade in late July. Other than that, it's more the excitement of players starting to make their way to town. Some 20-second hype videos the team's putting out, where Brady Tkachuk, Jake Sanderson, all the core pieces are starting to come early and get those captain skates. So a lot of anticipation in the nation's capital right now.
Let's start with Ullmark. What does the addition of a world-class goalie mean for this team at this time?
Well, they've taken so many swings, right? You go back to Craig Anderson, the greatest goalie in Ottawa Senators history. When the two sides decided to part ways at the pandemic, Ottawa took a swing on Matt Murray. Then they took a swing on Cam Talbot, albeit for a shorter-term contract, but you give up an asset in Philip Gustafsson, who ends up having a really good year after the trade. So there was that double swing, if you want to call it. And then the long-term swing with Joonas Korpisalo did not work out. So for Ottawa, of course, they gave up assets. That first-round pick, Dean Letourneau, certainly has high upside down the road. But to turn a draft pick and get rid of the contract of Joonas Korpisalo, otherwise holding $1 million, but still the majority of it, to land Ullmark, of all the goalies I named there, this is the only one with a Vezina pedigree and a guy whose worst season would still be considered really good for what Ottawa's seen in the crease over the last number of years.
So how many games do you think he'll start this year, assuming that he stays healthy all season?
It's very interesting because Anton Forsberg's also in the last year of his deal, and he had a winning record last year. He had a few stinkers where he let in 4 goals in the first period and he got the hook, but he's a goalie who you expect to bounce back, works extremely hard, always touted as one of those guys who's in the gym first, out last, and he really had a tough year, an .890 save percentage. He was also coming back after 2 torn MCLs in both his knees the year before. So he's not getting any younger either. He'll be 32 this season. They're trying to find a spark here with these two. Fun, quick story is both Anton Forsberg and Linus Ullmark were a goalie tandem in Swedish junior hockey in a small town in northern Sweden in the early 2010s. So they're reuniting those two and hoping that the tandem can have success. To answer your question, I'll say 50 games for Ullmark, and you're looking at about 22 or 32 rather for Anton Forsberg.
And as far as confidence goes, I mean, obviously knowing that you have that former Vezina goalie back there should give this team more confidence on the ice on a game-in, game-out basis. But how do you see it affecting the psychological aspect of this team?
It's certainly big, but at this point in the rebuild in Ottawa, failing to take the next step in 2 straight years now, maybe taking a couple big swings that didn't work out. I mentioned the goalies. How about going back-to-back years, giving up your first-round pick that ends up being in the first half because you missed the playoffs for Alex DeBrincat, Jacob Chychrun. Neither guy stays. So expectations have been raised over and over, and it's like who's been brought in. And this time it is Ullmark for sure. But Gil, I'm looking at the core pieces of this team. Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, and Jake Sanderson, namely, among other players that have to play well. Josh Norris and Thomas Chabot are your two X factors, with health mostly being the reason why. But they're all making big money now, and those guys have a combined 0 playoff games. And as a core, they need to really take their game to the next level for Ottawa to do the same.
So besides Ullmark, what were some of the other moves that you thought were positive ones for this team this offseason?
Well, it's different. Let's see if it's positive or negative. I think Ottawa made a few adjustments up front. Some of it cap related, having to move on from Mathieu Joseph. They're certainly going to miss his speed in the lineup. But what they did was they added veterans and guys who are 30 plus in David Perron, Nick Jensen, just more leadership type guys. And then they took an upside swing, they believe, in Michael Amadio, who helped the Vegas Golden Knights win a Stanley Cup 2 seasons ago, had a few big goals, 10 points in those playoffs. But I think they're kind of banking on him to be a Swiss Army knife. They're looking at Shane Pinto, who they locked up internally for 2 more years to have a full season after the off-ice distraction and the half-season suspension that he served at the start of last year. So that in itself is going to be big. The stat that us Sens fans are leaning on, Gil, is when all of Tim Stützle, Josh Norris, and Shane Pinto are in the lineup, Ottawa has a very positive result and a really good record. Only problem is that it's happened so rarely with all 3 of them having their own situations that they need to see what they have down the middle. So offseason moves are adding veterans, but it's all about how that's going to gel with the core that they have locked up.
Now, one piece of news earlier this week, I know a new center ice logo revealed for the Ottawa Senators. Your thoughts on that, and what about, the fans' thoughts on that?
Well, it certainly sparked online debate. I think that being late August is a big reason for that. We're only 2 weeks away from the prospect tournaments, which means that hockey season is around the corner. But for now, we'll dive into these sorts of things. They basically enlarged the logo, so the back half of it isn't really on. It's different. We saw Vancouver do the same. It's enlarged. It's in your face, and I'm all good with it. I don't necessarily have strong opinions on it, but I think that it's different, and different is good when you're a team like Ottawa that has failed to take the next step in a couple of years. Like, you know what? Like, there's certain guys who want to, keep the goal song, which it's been forever. I'm kind of on board with that, but otherwise the intro music, just change the voodoo, because in the nation's capital, fans are getting pretty hungry for a successful season.
So hungry for a successful season. On paper, as of right now, are the Ottawa Senators a playoff team?
I'd say a big question mark, right? It's so hard. And I'll say, if, I have to make a decision, I'll say no, just out. But I want to have the confidence of saying that they're in. I like the pieces. I just have been burned twice in a row saying that they're going to do it, and they haven't. So it's almost like fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. I think I flipped that the other way. Third time, let's just be cautiously optimistic. And I just think that if you're an Ottawa Senators fan, you've seen November be the downfall, time in, time out, which is so disheartening because you're out of the race before U.S. Thanksgiving. It's like, what's the point? Bring me to the draft. Can we fast forward? So I think Ottawa as a team has to look at this season in different compartments where they have to treat, we on Locked On Sens are going to say the first 4 series are going to be 7 games. So you've got that to take you into the middle, late November. And then they'll have another push before the Christmas break when they're going to embark on the longest road trip in franchise history. There is the Christmas break in between, but the World Juniors are in Ottawa this winter. So they have to leave the building for that. So how are they going to deal with that extended road trip? And then we'll look at the rest of the season from there. So I can't look ahead to the playoffs, Gil. I know that's a bit of a roundabout answer, but I've just been hurt before. Okay. I'll just say that there's a lot of internal confidence with what we're hearing from the players who need to be the guys to take the next step. The onus is on them. They know that. They know what they need to do. There's a new coaching staff. The ownership's been here a year. The new management's been here since November. there's no more excuses. It's just a matter of going out and being able to play consistent hockey to get wins.
All right, well, we'll see if they can do that, and I know you'll have it covered every step of the way. Ross, why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they can find the podcast, where they can find you and your co-host on social media?
At Sens Central on Twitter. Weigh in on the great debate, the center ice logo. Locked On Senators 5 days a week. Just type it in YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Really excited for another great year of Locked On NHL as well. Obviously, Eastern Conference every Wednesday. Mike DiStefano and I break down all the biggest stories. And it's almost hockey season, guy. It's been a long summer. Ottawa hasn't played a game since April, and I'm starving for hockey. So thanks for asking me to do this, and we'll chat again down the road.
All right, Ross. Thanks so much. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.